We good, Rodrigo? Should we go ahead and begin? All right. I'm on the end, so I'll start.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Greenberg. I've got a bio somewhere out there, but as far as audio goes, I've worked with small studios all my life, and you do everything in a small studio. And audio is actually really one of the fun things. Design and programming and everything else, you're tearing your hair out. But audio always goes smoothly. And it's always a lot of fun. But really, it's a lot of fun to plan the music and the sound effects. It is a lot of fun to sit there early in a project and say, all right, this weapon's going to make a kaboom! And this one's going pew pew! And you really get to live out your 5-year-old as a game designer at that point. So that's the role I've done. I don't actually make the stuff. I just say, this is what the sound should do. Let's find someone to do it.
I'm Jesse Allen. I worked for Electronic Arts for 13 years, making all the pew pew and clack and everything else kind of sounds in the craziest of ways. And a lot of us, what we did was essentially listen to the design team what they wanted to do and figured out how to make that a reality.
Hi, I'm Matt Franklin. I'm the de facto voice actor here. I say that because I'm also a videographer and an audio engineer and a writer and a whole bunch of other things. But I do have game credits as a voice actor. I narrate audiobooks professionally from my house. So I'm here to give that sort of the talent perspective on what we're talking about today.
So this panel is working very much like a real-life audio project in a game, in that Jesse and I have talked about it, and the talent knows nothing about what we've talked about with this panel. So the idea is that I always kind of talk about the producer's side of it. That's usually where things start. Then Jesse would go more in depth on the let's just call him the sound guy, because everything gets shoveled on one guy no matter what his title is, lead engineer, lead audio, whatever. And then Matt will tell you how it all rolls downhill to him in the end, and how he has to make sense of what we've done and salvage all the garbage we've put together. Sound good, Matt?
Yeah,
I don't care.
That sounds about
Here's the talent, I don't care. So the design production side is fun with games, period. It is a game in itself. And one of the things that you'll do early on when you're figuring out what you want, how cool the audio is going to be, how it's going to be this monumental, never before, no game can compare to it, awesome audio, is realize that you've got $10 with which to make that happen after you've worked out your budget and how much goes to programming and how much goes to everybody else. Something I'm going to talk about in my next presentation briefly is how you do budgeting. And as Jesse will tell you, audio is often the last thing people think about when they do budgeting. But it really does need to be included in that. And to a great degree, that'll decide what you can and cannot accomplish. So once I pulled out that budget, what you'll see at a lot of studios is they've got a budget for audio. And that's music, that's sound effects, and maybe, if you're lucky, it's VO as well. And now someone's breaking it down before. So they didn't have enough money for audio to begin with, and now they're breaking it into 3 components. But now they're going out and they're finding composers who can work in games and do effective things based on what they're putting together, and let's do a whole bunch of audio reels from composers. They're going through sound effects libraries and finding sound engineers like Jesse to go ahead and make new, interesting sounds so you're not hearing the exact same pew-pew you've heard a million times before. And then they're finding folks to find voice talent like Matt. So one of my earliest issues is how much money do I have to spend and where does it have to spend? And once I've done that, I'm breaking it down in my head even before I meet with Jesse, saying, okay, each sound effect is probably going to cost me X. Each minute of voice, and really each voice recording session, is going to cost me X amount of money. I've got to make sure that's in there. And then the time for the audio guy to put it together, and depending on the company, then there'll be the time that the programmers are going to spend working with the audio guy to get into the games might be lumped into the audio budget as well. So you can really be parceling it out. And if you're a small studio, you do want to kind of focus on doing this because you do not have enough money for what you want to do. And you want to be clear very on, yes, I know I want 1,000, 1,000,000 unique sound effects that no one's ever had before, but there's got to be some honesty. It's what you can really afford and what you can put together. And then you come up with what is the fun part of it, all the list of my sounds. The Mason Cannon is going to make this sound. The BFG is going to make that sound. I need running foot footprints, I need running footsteps on concrete, I need running footsteps in leaves, I need a person sneaking around, I need at least, everyone's favorite, 3 death sounds. And yeah, it's like those.
If I can interject,
Yep.
Andrew, what you're talking about is a real tunnel vision kind of thing, where people at the top, they maybe come from a specific part of the whole. That's their background, and that's what they know how to budget for. I've seen it in film too. I've worked with directors who really know cameras, but they don't think about how much time the actors need to learn their lines at the very minimum, or how much time the post-production team has to process your footage, process your audio, then cut it together, and then edit it because you don't like it. So if you're in a position, whether it's audio or not, to be making these budget calls, you have to take that high-level view of every part of the project. And you're right, audio usually is at the bottom because nobody comes to programming or even camera work from an audio background.
Right, right. And I know I'm stealing Jesse's thunder a little bit on this. I, as a producer, am a firm proponent on audio should be included in the conversation, the design conversation early on. That often doesn't happen. So what's going to happen to the sound engineers, I'm halfway into the game and now I've got the graphics for the shots, I know what all the guns are, and then I'm coming to Jesse to start making me neat explosions to go with it. And he's had no input early on into how this is going to work. However, we're going to talk about that optimal situation, which you all will be able to follow, which is where you've got your own studio, so early on you can talk to the audio guy. So I've got my list of what I see the sound effects being, about how much music I think I can include, and what sort of VO, what sort of voiceover we're going to need. That's when I come to someone like Jesse and I say, okay, here's what we need, what can we do? And now he has to interpret what I've been putting into an actual usable form. So I'll pass it on to Jesse at this stage.
So usually when we get projects, we certainly define scope of what they're doing, and also kind of like prodding it a little bit of where does it go from here. So, if you're doing gun sounds or crowd sounds or whatever, is it for just this game? Or are you going to evolve this game over several titles? And when you're trying to justify budgets and everything, maybe you just say, look, we're going to take this little chunk right here, and we're going to go after, these 3 guns or this 5, whatever it is that they're after, and piecemeal it out, or can collectively we make a larger donation to audio and kind of future-proof yourself for a couple of years. And that happens with actors and such as well. If you know that, hey, we want to hire him to be the voice actor, is he going to be back next year? Is he going to be in for all the DLC? And kind of like figure that out. Also, if let's say Andrew's part of a greater studio network or whatever, is there any other studios working on any titles of similar nature? Because that also can offset your cost. It's like, or maybe even with the composer. If you approach a composer and say, I have 2 projects for you, could you work us a really good price on, both of them? That might be lesser than if you just say, I'm just going to ask you for 1 project, and that's going to be the thing that takes their time. So qualifying the money is an essential thing. And then really going into the level of complexity of what it is that we're recording. So for instance, on a lot of stuff I used to do, the big one that we used to get was, hey man, we want to have chants for like NCAA games to sound completely authentic. Completely authentic is really hard to do when you're talking about 50,000 people saying something. So we tried everything from let's just get a bunch of people up on rafters and have them say it, and then we can just stack the files and have them record it different ways. We were like, well, maybe we can get people to volunteer and fill up like a high school stadium and do the same thing. And of course, we even had somebody once say, why don't you just take 100 microphones around one person? But
you got a 1,000 track recorder.
Yeah, 1,000 microphones around one person. But really the way to do it is to do it for real, and trying to sell that idea of like, let's talk about how we go and record every college stadium or every, massive football stadium. And it's not something you're going to do in a year. It's something that you're going to have to do over a great period of time. And how do you make that affordable? Is there any other ends? In some situations, it could be like ESPN or some other sports network is also covering it. They already have mics out on the field or whatever. Is there a way we can work with them? Is there a way we can talk with them? Or vice versa. Maybe they could use some assistance on the sound side, and we're able to kind of come up with this perfect little marriage for that situation, you know. There's a lot of approaches to it, and same with weapons and everything else too. There's also, depending on if you're working with contractors, maybe the contractor is saying, you know, yeah, I'll record you 15 cars, but you get non-exclusive rights to it. You know, I can license this library off to another group. I will reduce the rate to your studio. You'll get the top-notch recorded cars, but I get to, you know, do with these as I please.
And as a producer, that's the deal I'll take. Like if I can get a year exclusive, I'll pay a little more, get a non-exclusive right. He can do those, but he can't license out for another year. So
Sure.
I'll be first out on the market with it, but then everyone else will have my same sounds. I don't object to that at all.
Right. And as far as the voice talent goes, this is one that is really kind of misunderstood in the industry, and that is...
Oh, really?
He's like... it starts with just what they kind of expect the narrator or voice talent or actor to do. A lot of people will write up a story, they'll read it in their mind, and they're like, that's exactly what I want them to say. But even if I like write up a story and have Andrew read it to me aloud, I'm like, that's not the way that was supposed to come off, you know? And that's really the part of story writing, is rewriting it, listening to it in a kind of a third-party voice or a third voice, and then rewriting it to make more sense.
And thinking about it in terms of a gamer who can hit spacebar and avoid that conversation at any moment.
Yeah, exactly. And that way, if you spend the time on the front end to refine it that way, by the time I hand it off to you, I have a world of notes there, and also just the way it's written and the way it's formatted makes so much more sense.
Right.
And that's what's going to give him the better performance. So when you're talking about a voice actor's time, which they often freak out about, is like, it costing me how much an hour or whatever. I'm like, yeah.
Plus catering.
Yeah.
Be prepared. Be very well prepared. So when I hand it to you, you can do what you do absolutely the best, and then we come out with like, that was an awesome recording.
And another thing that I'll add to what you were saying earlier about the reusability of hiring talent, the more you work with a specific talent, the better you will know that talent's capabilities. So yes, you do need to do that. I mean, pro tip, when you're writing a game, read your stuff out loud, because it doesn't sound right up here. But, you know, you write it, you get it refined, and then you hand it to me, and I interpret it. You know, there's still that last minute of, this is how I will say it, this is how it'll come out of me. Well, the next time we work together, you know what I'm going to do. You know, and the time after that, you know it even better. Remind me of the Gladys voice actor's name?
Oh,
Ellen McLean.
Yeah.
Yeah, she gave a talk at Siege about this one year, and you know, the first time they did Portal 1, she was the voice actor, and by the end of it, she had a really good feel for it, and they were bouncing off ideas. Portal 2 came around, and she was involved in writing it. You know, not in that she was hired as a writing talent, but they could come to her and say, what would Gladys say here? So, just a note on the long-termness of your budgeting and your talent hiring.
And I think this raises a very important issue for VO particularly, in that I have not been involved in the game where the script didn't change during recording. So the classic examples I give, there was one of the Star Trek titles we did. We'd done it, everything had been approved, it was great, and then we put it in the actors' hands, and well, there are certain Star Trek actors who are very clear that they know what their characters say better than anyone else does, and will make that point emphatically. So you then have to take that into account and rewrite on the fly there. The Mall Tycoon game we did, we had a great voice actor on that, and it was great because we got him into the studio, and then he is coming up with ideas for things we should have included, and suddenly we're putting them in, or he's changing the dialogue on it, and he was someone we were very comfortable working with, so we would let him throw out ideas on how it should be, how certain lines should be given, and that was great. So we have to get notifications when the player's running out of money. So he does this very jolly one, "You're out of money!" It was just hilarious to have this one suddenly run. The game's so happy you're out of money. We just knew we had to include it. So it's not just that it's good to have a familiar actor, it's that they can really provide a lot of interesting nuance to a role.
Like Peter Dinklage.
Yeah. Well, that's also a little bit of a difference between an actor and just a voice talent. There are some people that just have an awesome voice and they can read verbatim what's on the page and deliver it in a very clear and concise way. And then there's an actor who can actually pour emotion into a character that is just words. And there's different ways of recording that too. I'm a big advocate of, like, I understand the reason why you want to record in a voice booth and with the isolation and everything. But I also say that if you take a really good actor who's just got a good presence, especially if somebody's been working in film or stage or whatever, why don't you record them like you would record them for a film and literally have hand-operated booms or whatever and walk around the actor, let them emote, let them gesture, and really get into it. It doesn't sound like, you know, when I say that, like it would make that much sense. But it makes a world of sense when you actually see an actor stand stiff in front of a microphone reading in there versus letting them have the space to give you the performance. And it will bring a character to life like you cannot believe. And that also is leaving it up to the actor to kind of tell you how they would express that. Like you can even say, here's the line that or here's the message we're trying to get across. What is the best way you could express this emotion? You know, in some situations, maybe your writer doesn't even really best know how to do that. Then don't write the line. Write the scenario. This is what's going to happen. What would you say?
Just improvise it. I think that gets into competence as a director and being able to trust your talent. And it goes back again to what I was saying earlier about everyone on a project will interpret what they're doing. And actors, that's all we do is we interpret. Through expression. So if you're not one of these micromanagers who has to give me every single line reading, which is the fastest way to kill a reading, by the way, then you will probably discover things about your script that you didn't notice when I do it.
Now, as that micromanager, I will step in at this point, though, and say that I'll make clear that there are parameters, and this is one thing you always have to understand for game audio. Part of the reason is that it is often a second thought is because for some players, they don't give it a first thought, and it is registering subconsciously. The impact of audio is not good audio does not stand out to the player. Bad audio does. So it is not something they're making big note of, even though your Metacritic score is 20% audio. So if you want a good Metacritic score, you got to have good audio anyway. But when I'm working with an actor and we're giving them some sort of freedom, they do need to understand that this can't be 20 seconds. This has to be really short. Mm-hmm. If you've got to get something across to the player, it really does have to be very quick. And as they're talking about emotions, it's very hard to get emotion across in something that is mere seconds. I'm not even talking 10 seconds. I'm not even really talking 5 seconds. Players who are sitting for that long listening are hitting that space button. Mm-hmm. And they're tired of hearing it at that stage. And the worst thing is, and this is something you always have to avoid, the voiceover is still going on when the game setting has changed. The classic example, you're out of money. Okay, I've changed something. Now I'm getting money, but that voice is still going. And I know this coming in, so in 2 seconds, I've changed the game, and this dialogue is going on for 10 seconds.
There's a great example of that out of, I think, BioWare, Cthulhu, Dark Corners of the Earth, or whatever it was. They built that on the Cthulhu role-playing game, where it's very sanity-driven, and the voice acting reflects that as things happen to you dynamically. His delivery will change from very calm to very nervous and what's going on. But then they hit a narrative beat where it's just a pre-recorded line and he goes back to perfectly normal. But then we're back to crazy.
Yeah, the whole integration of speech, it becomes its own thing. And it used to be enough to essentially, you walk up to a character, you trip the wire, and essentially they give you their line, then you go on your merry way. But also, the veil comes off the illusion pretty quickly when you go back to the character. He says the exact same line in the exact same way, and you're like, you aren't real, are you? It's different when, you could do the same thing, and maybe the third time you go back, you already asked me that twice, and then you're like, whoa, Audio can really sell your AI, and great audio can even trigger what we call the theater of the mind, which we really love in design, where essentially it's like the game is way more intelligent than I expect it to be, or it's able to comprehend things that I'm doing in a way I didn't expect it to be able to do. So, and that is a kind of like a discipline and an art within itself. And that doesn't just apply to voice acting, it could apply to your environment. I mean, there's certainly the things where, you know, you're in the forest, you hear all the birds and everything, and then you start opening fire with your machine guns and you hear all the birds fly away, and then everything gets super quiet. You know, and the music changes and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's all interactive audio, and that also plays on the emotion. As he says, like if you nail audio great, nobody's going to say, "Oh, that's the most amazing audio." They're going to say, "This game feels awesome." Mm-hmm. It is an emotional, it's a visceral experience. It's not something that you can really, you know, latch on to.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And when you're planning for audio early on, you need to be thinking of the various roles that it fulfills. The primary role it has is providing information to the player. So the fact that you're hearing a pew pew noise isn't just atmospheric, it's to let you know that you're being shot at or that your shot has gone off. The fact that there's a voice there should mean there's some sort of information, something that needs to be provided to the player. We've all love how music fits the scene. The music should be providing that information. So information is always job one for audio. And in my mind, everything else is secondary to that. Even providing a good feel is secondary, providing that information. So that's why, for instance, and not everyone agrees with me on this, when I'm contracting game music, I don't want there to be anything in it that could sound like a sound effect. I don't want to hear something that sounds like a gunshot, something that sounds like an engine, because if I'm hearing that in a game, it should mean something. Classic theater line, if there's a gun in the first scene, it should be fired in the second. If I hear a gun, it should have something to do with my game. If I hear a shot, it should have something to do with my game. So informational, but then you go to the evocative. Then you go to what is this making me feel? And then you're going on down the line. There should be something humorous in here, something to break tension for player, etc. And that's where then going to someone like Jesse is great, because I can come to him knowing what I want to create, but not how to create it. And then I'm sitting down with Jesse, and it's kind of his job to pull it out of me. What should this mean? I want a gun that sounds really big. Well, there's a lot of different big guns. What do you mean by a gun that sounds big? And that's where a good sound engineer can really start pulling it out of the design team and the rest of the staff.
Yeah, we can open up conversations essentially at that thing is like, do you want the gun to sound big or do you want the moment to sound big? Because a lot of things that you can do is prepare for that moment where you're like, man, in this scene, this gun goes off and everybody's like, oh my God. And it's like you build up to that moment and then all sounds fall away and there's your scene, and then here comes the lines that follow it and the music that follows that. And all the things just kind of unfold into this, you know, great event or great moment in the game. And those games that do that really well, like Last of Us was a really great one. It had a lot of those moments where the music was timed right, the lines were timed right, but that's by design. That's not something that happens coincidentally, you know.
I was directing a 48-hour short film this past weekend, and I wasn't involved in the audio production, but I was helping them discuss it. And one thing that I noticed is the instinct was to keep going bigger. Mm-hmm. And I kept saying, well, wait, no. In this scene, we're building a crescendo, but what if we never deliver? What if the crescendo is nothing? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to stop yourself from the enthusiasm of let's add to it and add to it and add to it. Audio is very psychological in that regard. So be wary when you're working with actors or sound effects or even music of how is exactly what I'm doing right now informing what I'm about to do.
And that's a very point, and that's part of why so much money goes into game explosions, because that's often the last thing on a level. Something's blowing up big, a death scream from the big boss, all of those we'll really see a little bit more money will go into those things. So we've told you a bit about us. One thing we should have done early on was get more of a sense of you guys, what you're looking for out of this. How many of you are actually already working on game projects? How many of you consider yourselves the audio person? All right.
I like this.
Maybe?
How many of you are the folks that are going to have to, how many of you are going to have to work with audio? All right. So how many of you kind of do that producer role where you're trying to map out what is needed and then you're handing it off to someone? Any actual voice talent in here? There we go. A lot of jazz hands. All right, so that's a good look at it. And do feel free to ask questions. I know we've been kind of hit the ground running, but if you do have questions about specific areas and the like, let us know. One of the things that Jesse's presented on very well in the past has been the tools that he's used, and I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the ones that that folks can use.
Can we take 1 second?
Did you edit me out now?
Yeah.
So as far as, are you looking at runtime tools or just tools of acquiring sound?
Yeah, both, actually. I want to, since both of folks are going to be doing the first audio session, how do you record it, what do you do, and then how do you put it into the game?
Sure, so recording, as I had mentioned earlier, I really try to go after the nature or the actual sound that you really want. If you want to record an awesome car, figure out a way to get a hold of an awesome car. If you want to record, massive crowds and hear huge cheering, figure out what environment you need to put yourself in to record that. It's like the Lord of the Rings guys, they literally stopped a soccer game at like intermission or whatever and said, we just need you to do a couple cheers. And you're all orcs, by the way. Bam, go. And but that performance is amazing. And it does take a lot of planning. It's not something you're just going to run out there with a microphone and do. Sometimes I have a really good friend, Watson Wu, that records a lot, and I've seen how much planning he puts into making something happen. It could take him months to forecast out an actual recording session. And then, of course, that day comes and he's exceptionally well prepared and is able to kind of just, bring in all these wonderful sounds. Once you get or actually on location, there's a million types of equipment that you can use depending on what it is that you're trying to record or to what scale. I've done everything from like a recorder like this, one of these like small 2-channel recorders, which are very affordable. They go from $100 to $300 depending on what you're getting. Those are great, especially if you're just experimenting with sound for the very first time. As you start to kind of move up the tiers, there's of course some multi-channel devices out there. Tascam has a new little 4-channel recorder. Zoom has a little 6-channel recorder. Those are great if you're plugging in multiple mics and trying to get either a larger spatial recording, surround recording, or multiple perspectives, like car recordings, which I do. We have exhaust mics, we have engine mics, we have interior mics, and that way, you can hand that off to the integrators of that, and depending on what perspective in the car is, you can hear it in different perspectives as well. Because remember, as he was saying, audio is information. Let it be your UI. Let it be, the kind of overall experience of, without cluttering up your screen with like, here's what you're hearing and what you're supposed to be feeling and seeing or whatever. As far as editorial tools, there are so many variants of digital audio workstation tools out there, and you can pay as much money as you possibly can think up for it. Personally, I've been using a program called Reaper for like 6-7 years just because of its versatility. It's not even that expensive of a program, but its ease of use and the way you can turn around things. Also, the difference between like a little sound editor like SoundForge or Audacity or any of those types of tools. Those are great if you're just manipulating a single file versus a multi-track file, which will actually need a formal digital audio workstation. I said there's no need to overkill it with that kind of tech. As far as integrating sound, there's certainly plenty of third-party engines that just deal with audio, Wise, Fmod, any of those kinds of things. Of course, where I came from, it was all proprietary stuff. We were even getting into audio with Frostbite and all that, which is kind of really some unusual methodologies of dealing with audio. And that's pretty much the chain of tools and processes to create those kinds of experiences.
Real quick, if any of you are on Twitter or Facebook, you mentioned Watson Wu. He's amazing at social media. He is throwing out what he's doing in the field, what equipment he's using, how he's using it all the time. So if you have any interest in learning how to work with audio gear, he's a great guy to follow.
Totally.
Yeah, let's you have him at Siege doing a motorcycle recording session. Maybe in the parking lot, maybe in the hotel lobby, we're not sure yet.
Yeah, exactly. No, he is really a master of his craft, for sure.
Matt, why don't you talk a little bit about a voice acting session from the voice actor's point of view? So you walk in the door, you might have gotten the script the night before.
Right.
You might be handed coming in, you might just see that you got one a week ago and now it's completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So how does it all go from the voice actor's perspective?
Well, it depends. There's kind of two main categories that I can break that down into. The first one that I have the most experience with is recording in my closet by myself, where I am entirely responsible for how I interpret the script in the moment, and then feedback is a very disjointed experience. And then there's going to the studio, which is so much nicer. Because you get that immediate feedback. You're not worried about your own equipment. But yeah, you do have that short turnaround time more often than not. Because once again, voice actors are usually the last ones to know. And there again, if you have worked with a talent before, you can go to them as you're writing it for feedback. You can think about them in the back of your head while you're writing it. But the process is, in a way, it's easier than theater and film, and in a way it's harder because since I'm not being seen, I don't have to worry about that side of the performance, and I can give you a voice doing whatever I need to do with my face, and it doesn't matter. So I can kind of cut corners in learning the lines and whatever. You know, I always have the lines in front of me, so I don't really have to learn them. But you can also run into a situation where maybe I'm on a completely different page from the studio in terms of what you want. And I remember one time I recorded a line 70 times. In one day, that was just one day. So it always comes down to how much you're communicating as a producer with the actor, and then the other way around as well. I don't know if that answered the question.
That's pretty good. I still don't know what the line was you had to record 70 times.
Oh my God, I don't want to talk about that project.
Well, since we have some folks who are actually interested in voice, how do you keep yourself fresh as a voice actor for an entire day? I mean, speaking for a couple hours, anyone who's ever been a teacher knows what a pain that can be.
Yeah. Well, voice is muscles, right? And any muscle is endurance training. The more you do it, the better you'll get, for one, but warm-ups, there are so many basic theatrical warm-ups that you can do with your voice. The favorite one that I do is just up and down scales.
Do that facing the camera.
You look stupid, and you know you don't want to do that in an elevator, but anything you can do to loosen up the vocal cords, to get them ready to perform. Like right now, I'm in terrible voice. I've been rushing all day. I haven't been drinking enough water. Water's another big one. Not caffeine, not sugary, not alcohol. I've seen people do that, which that makes it very hard to work with your throat. And as a matter of fact, if any of you are really involved in the voice acting scene, I haven't followed it closely enough, but there's been a strike recently, or talks of one, in the voice acting for games community. Because if you speak all day, you end up sounding like this. And
That's what we want you coming in sounding like.
right, yeah, not gonna work, absolutely. But you can do a session and be wrecked for a week. And, you know, yes, you have to pay me a lot as a voice actor, but that's because I'm doing it right now. I can't do that every day, over and over again, and make a living. I'll wreck my larynx. And that's it.
Let's talk about the care and feeding of voice talent, voice actors. What should be done other than having a catering spread?
Build rest time in to the schedule. Yes, the more you can get out of them in a day, the better it is. But if you kill your talent, you're going to be waiting for them to recuperate. Make sure that you have that water on hand, preferably not tap water. It's always nicer to be a little nicer than that. Fresh lemon is something that I personally like to have around. But yeah, just remember that you're working with a human, and give them time to stop and catch their breath and catch up on their exercises.
I also say you break up your script as well, as far as the intensity of the reads.
Yes.
You know, as you're working toward, let's say you have an all-day session with voice talent. You start off with kind of the quieter material or less intense material. Right before you go to lunch, you might have that, you know, we're going to hit a couple of these really high-intensity lines. Then you take your hour-long lunch or whatever, let them recover, let them kind of reset. And then in the afternoon, start again, lower intensity stuff, work your way up through upper intensity stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
That's nice. Well, I think we're down to about less than 10 minutes, so if you have questions, start lining up over at the microphone over on the right, and we'll do a song and dance as people get over there. Jazz hands time again. So if you'd state your name and state your question.
Screw that.
Great name.
No, my name is Brandon, and I guess this question is more for you two, mainly Jesse. How do you record sounds like crowds for cheap?
If you want to do it inexpensively, especially like if you can find something that's being done at a college, they're usually pretty easy to approach. See if, number one, if they have a set of microphones that you can tap off somebody's mixing console. So you don't even have to do anything other than provide the recorder.
Yeah.
If you actually have to get your own recorders or whatever, even as simple as go rent a couple of recorders. There's a lot of like camera stores that rent those small recorders for, I don't know, $30 a day or something like that. Not very much money. And they'll even mail them to you, from anywhere. So under $100, you could probably have a pretty good set of mics and recorders, and you just hit a couple events and, maybe go get a little press pass. Hey, can I put a couple of these recorders down where those photographers are sitting or whatever? That would be the cheap way of going about it. You can go up from there. But another thing, again, about the equipment, seriously, rent the equipment. Like, don't feel like you need to go buy everything, So.
So another thing on that, since I do them on the cheap, is twofold. One, if you're doing it out in public, if something specific you want to record, doing it in a public place is actually safe. You don't actually have to get, I'm not a lawyer, but what happens in a public space is public. So you
Even
can
for
record.
commercial?
Pardon?
Even for commercial use?
That gets trickier, but that's exactly what happens with news stations.
Mhm.
If they're recording out on the street, they can use it freely.
Put up a sign, yeah.
You're best off to put up a sign. You don't want to take anything you shouldn't have on that. The second thing is that there are a lot of sound effects libraries.
Mm-hmm.
And this is if you don't need a specific crowd noise, but just need people going peas and carrots, peas and carrots, peas and carrots. You can get those and you can manipulate them a bit using something like SoundForge. But I agree with Jesse, you're best off, especially if there's something specific you want to get, finding a group of people who will do it just for the credit of being in your game, and I list their credits. Heck, Kickstarter's doing it now. I've got 1,000 Kickstarter backers. Why not 100 voice actors as credits in the game? So certainly doable.
Hello, my name is Preston High, and I have a question related to audio production for game design. How much would you say a certain audio loop, or anywhere ranging all the way to like an effect blip, would cost in order to actually put budget in forth?
Okay. A lot of that depends if you're basing it off of real sounds, and it would cost you a production day to go record the sounds or rent the equipment or whatnot, versus something that is basically synthetically created or created with a library. There's a lot of ways to approach it. It really depends what type of game you're going after. And the other thing that you can always consider as a small studio or whatever is that you don't need to always answer that yourself. Sometimes it's like you can qualify, okay, it's going to cost us $5,000 to do this. Or I can hire this guy Watson or somebody of that nature who's going to provide me a price, but they might be able to do it for less, because maybe it's just like the thing where I said where they've either licensed it or will license it for something else or whatnot. So it's easy to kind of like set up in your mind what it would cost to produce the sounds that you need versus licensing them or to get somebody else to provide them for you. Those are the three costs that you would need to investigate.
And one more question. For producing or recording audio, what typical production software or like tools do you use to develop synthetically?
So it kind of depends on the nature of the sound. Some of my favorite tools, I love Native Instruments Complete, which really for the money is the most amount of tools in one box, and it's I think it's even under $500 now or something like that. It's got an amazing sampler in there that allows you to do kind of Foley work and manipulate sounds to a really high degree and make them interactive. You can build interactive prototypes out of it. You can do a lot of that kind of stuff. Also on the even extreme cheapest like Fmod Studio or whatever, where you can download it for free, manipulate sounds and whatever, and actually have them in a runtime environment, which is even cooler. So,
Thank you.
sure.
I think he's gonna throw us out of here.
I'm curious about.
State your name, please.
My name is Rodrigo Bando, and I'm curious about something in terms of audio, and I'm not in any way trying to replace the voice actors in any way, but
It happens.
you knew that, man. But when you're here in a game, the same line, you were saying, you come on, you say it the same way, etc. And well, we could record different ways so that you can just put it, deliver it different ways. But is there anything that has been done, and this is now a curiosity on my part, where you can actually have a recording which is toneless recording,
Mm-hmm.
and then manipulate it in, as you mentioned a moment ago, in game, manipulate it to provide some other tonality at a runtime. The reason I say this is because back in about 93, 94, I produced a software. I wrote the software, but I also produced the audio and the artist rendering. It was a system to teach how to read.
Mm-hmm.
And the system will actually read word by word to you. But I didn't want artists having to record every single line. So there were certain times that if I could just change the tonality
Mm-hmm.
of a word, then I'll say, see it this way, nothing, the emotion. And then I will manipulate that, at the signal level. So I don't know whether there's something that's done now that you could control that.
That's starting to essentially what you're looking for is something that you can make a virtual reactor or virtual actor say things, or have a known actor say things in a different way. So maybe I record 1,200 lines from you, and out of that 1,200 lines, I could make 10,000 derivatives of the 1,200 lines.
As a voice actor, I object.
Sure.
Did we hear something? Do you hear something?
Yeah.
Disclaimer, right?
Yeah. I can tell you, I've seen some companies going after that. I know one of them that was bought by Google that was promising on that. I've never heard a completely successful demo of it. Although I've seen it done a little bit better in the music world. There's a lot of choir VST libraries that now you can phonetically type in whatever you want, and then depending on how you play it, it'll actually emote like a choir will. But a choir is a different thing, right? It's a longer phrase, it's a longer sound than specific words. Will it get there? Yeah, I'm sure it'll probably get there. I mean, you see what happens with the visual world and digital actors and stuff. It's only a matter of time. Or procedural audio or any of that kind of stuff. Certainly on the verge of that. My argument against that is unless they have some outrageously amazing algorithms, you're never going to get the emotion of a really great actor. And it can really transform the difference between, here's some words, I want to hear a voice say those words, versus somebody who is going to stand in front of a microphone and put a little bit of their soul into that character. And, the games that people really fall in love with have really great actors that have done those type performances, the Jennifer Hales and all those kinds of people that you listen to and you're just like, you went through that experience and you feel like it's part of an experience you've had in your actual life, So I would say that's the argument not to go that route. And certainly when, you hear producers say, I want a game that has a really strong emotional presence or whatever, I'm going to try to lean them more toward hey, let's get a piece of music that's scored and crafted for the emotion of our game. Let's get some legitimate actors that, can do those kinds of performances, because you marry those two worlds together and you're going to have that bottled lightning that you really want to deliver to your fans,
Okay, last question.
Hey, my name is Loquarius, and my question is for Matt. And I had 2 questions.
I didn't do it, and you can't prove it.
And first one would be, how would you get a job as a voice actor? And the second one is which ties into that first question. How did you get your first job as a voice actor?
Okay, so story time, children. I mentioned that I do a lot of my work from home. There are many reasons for that. Voice acting is competitive, and it is a very small pool. Who's heard of Peter North? Is it Peter? Nolan, thank you. That's a different guy.
Not Peter North, no.
Is my wife in the room? Peter Nolan. He's a known voice actor, and he's in everything. He's got an agent. He's got a union behind him. I don't. So what you're going to have to do, if you're in my shoes, is you're going to have to go after a lot of independent projects that probably have a $25 budget for you, and that's going to be a full job. One thing I do is I do a lot of audiobooks through acx.com, and I'm sorry, I'm plugging something, but it's this wonderful service they publish to Amazon and Audible, and you interface directly with authors. So there's not a lot of red tape. You don't have to be in a union. You just get work, and it's kind of trial by fire. So how do I get work? I look outside of the industries I want to work in. I'd love to do more game characters, but I don't get a lot of those roles. So right now I'm doing other things.
And network.
Oh
yeah.
my God. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Any chance you get to talk to folks in the industry, do so. Audio engineers hire people they know and believe that they can work well with. Nothing is worse than a session between folks with competing visions who can't work together. Complete waste of money, time, and drains everybody for a while afterwards.
Kojima and Hater.
Yeah, absolutely. Metal Gear Solid at one point replaced a very recognizable voice with a celebrity. In my opinion, it was a mistake, but that's just my opinion.
I think we're over, but no one's raising
That's
time cards.
my second question.
Well, if you do it in the microphone, we appreciate it.
Oh, I'm sorry if I didn't answer both parts.
Yes, I get your first job.
Yeah.
Oh, how did I get my...
Yeah,
How did I get
you
my
don't
first
have no
job?
experience. How would you go?
Oh God, what was my first job? My first job as a voice actor, I just answered a kind of a classified ad on an internet. I think it's called Backstage.com. It's just entertainment job listings. You can find work all over the place. You could go to Craigslist, which is not fun. There are paid services that will put you in touch with jobs.
Don't expect your first job to be a paying job, unfortunately.
Yes and no. You can do a lot of free work, and then it's up to you to make sure that gets published and that you get the credibility for it. But just don't expect a really well-paying job. Going back to ACX, they have 2 pay models right now. They have royalty share, which you make nothing, but you get the work. And then they have per finished hour, where you make a living, but you don't get the job. So mitigate your expectations going in.
That sounds like an awkward.
Yeah. And look everywhere. You are your own advocate, is what it boils down to.
Yeah, and there's also groups that do And I'm not sure exactly what the sites are, but I do know that there's like a group that does like English translations for Japanese anime and that kind of stuff, and they're always looking for actors to kind of voice characters, and there's pretty good communities on that, which is good to help you build the experience you're going to need to get your first job and kind of like what to expect and whatnot. So I certainly encourage any types of groups that you can get involved with of that nature, either online or if there's like a meetup group in your area or something like that, absolutely pursue those.
And go to game jams.
Yeah.
Definitely. And you actually remind me of one more point. There are trade shows like Siege just for voice acting. If you are dead serious about it, look into some of those. There's one here in town, here in Atlanta called Voice Over Atlanta. And you won't get better information than you'll get there because that's all they talk about. And something that my eyes were open to going to one of those is, I'm a voice actor doesn't mean a whole lot. I am an anime dubbing voice actor. I am an audiobook narrator. I am an erotic audiobook narrator. Hey, it's a thing. Money. Also,
Now you're out of the closet.
pseudonyms, very useful. The point being, focus very intently on what it is you want to do. And that will inform your demo reel, that will inform who you talk to in the industry. And there again, keep a couple of options open.
All right. Thank you all very much. Obviously, our folks trying to get in here, so thank you.